He is Mark Stewart, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reporter covering the Wisconsin Badgers. Badgers getting set for a battle with South Dakota in week 2 of the season. It's going to be Saturday afternoon at Camp Randall Stadium, an FCS opponent, but a good one. We're going to talk about the Coyotes in just a second or two, but I wanted to start, of course, with the game to start the season. 28-14, a win over Western Michigan. A win is a win. I think Badgers fans were probably looking for a little bit more firepower than what we saw in that game, maybe a lot more firepower than what we saw in that game. The Badgers were trailing in the fourth quarter and had to rally back. So, Mark, we'll start on the positive front. What were the takeaways from that game that you thought were particularly good? We saw good running back performances. I think there were a few veterans who I think had pretty nice showings, as well as some of the younger players. So, like, what really stands out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the obvious thing is winning the game. As soon as UW got behind early in the fourth quarter, you wonder how they're going to respond. Do the jitters that come with being a big favorite kind of start to work to work against you. And so, it was good to see their response. They responded. They did catch a break on the muffed punt that hit the unsuspecting guy in the back. I mean, if you're a Western Michigan fan, it's one of those fluky plays where you're like, you got to be kidding me. But it worked out but that turnover worked out in Wisconsin's favor. They got the turnover that led to some points. So winning the game was positive. I mean, I thought that, although Wisconsin didn't push the ball downfield a lot, I mean, I did like the fact that Tyler Van Dyke spread the ball around. I mean, I think that's one of the things that people are going to be looking at is, I mean, Will Pauling is going to get his share of touches and targets. And I think Tretch Kekahuna eventually is going to get his share of touches or targets as well. But I think, 10 guys got the ball thrown at them at some point in the game. And I think if that trend continues, that's something that'll work well for the offense. Defensively, I mean, I thought it was, a pretty solid outing. They gave up 14 points. One of the touchdowns basically came off of a fake field goal. So, I mean, I think overall that was, it was a solid performance defensively. It's one of those games that you just can't, like, I know a lot of people are, concerned, based off what they saw, but it's one game. It's the first game, and now the question becomes, okay, how much will they be able to improve off of what we saw from week one? Because football is unique, especially at the college level, where you don't get, these teams don't get it. Like, it's not like a preseason. This is like essentially preseason football for the college level. So I'm trying not to read too much into, good or bad, into what we saw last week.
And that's fair. We would have probably said the same thing last year, and it did sort of end up portending what was to come with Alabama in a couple
Right.
weeks. They don't have a big runway to kind of get on the same page. Your evaluation of Tyler Van Dyke, he did, like you said, there weren't a lot of big splash plays. I think 17 yards might have been the most that the Badgers got in any offensive play. Didn't see a lot of shots down the field. The ones we saw kind of weren't very good. He threw a couple times really right into the arms of the Western Michigan defender. I know Luke Fickell said afterwards it was primarily, kind of playing against what Western Michigan was showing them, really on both sides of the ball, just taking those smaller chunks and then, just trying not to give up the big play. But do you sense just, I guess, straight evaluation of what we saw from Tyler Van Dyke, and if you feel like there's going to have to be more in the tank there? Maybe it's the receivers that aren't, because Will Pauling and Tretch Kekahuna are the slot guys, and you're not really seeing much from the outside. Your overall thoughts on that performance?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, excuse me. The good side was spreading the ball around. The bad was that there were probably two plays that if guys had better hands, they would have been interceptions. And from what I recall off the top of my head, at least one of those was in the red zone.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't good. The fumble, that put them in great field position. That wasn't good either. So as a quarterback, the number one thing is you got to protect the ball, and he put the ball in harm's way. you know, 2 times for sure through the air, and then losing it on the ground another time. So that, those are things that obviously, are concerning. Um, I like I said, as far as the shots downfield, it's one of those things where, okay, if it's not there, maybe he makes things worse by trying to force things downfield and creating the turnover. They were really um, in this bend don't break philosophy. I watched their coach's press conference after the game, and Western Michigan's coach's press conference after the game, and he was real happy with their defensive effort. It was, a bend don't break philosophy, and hey, we're going to make them work their way down the field and see if they can do that. And honestly, for the most part, Wisconsin moved the ball well. It was, just the red zone issues that, kind of made the game a little closer. But as far as Tyler goes, like I said, it's, some of the throws weren't, make you wonder. But it's the first week. And like I said, I'm not going to um, hold it against him too much. Let's see what happens this week against South Dakota. And then obviously next week, Alabama. That's going to be a great non-conference test to see, okay, where these guys really stand going into Big Ten play.
I'll put you on the spot and ask you who you think the star of the week was for the Badgers. There's a couple candidates. You wrote about Aaron Witt, who made a huge play defensively. Obviously, you had the two running backs, Tyree Walker and Ches Malusi, who both had very good games. Malusi coming back from a pretty serious leg injury that took a long time to heal. He was finally back on the spot. Kekahuna had a really nice day, contributed in special teams as well. Who would you say? Who is the star of week 1 for the Wisconsin Badgers?
I mean, I guess if I had to go with one person, because I was going to him and Han go with two guys, but I guess I would give it to Chaz because
Yeah.
just the whole story, him coming back and coming back from the injury, him scoring the first touchdown of the game on a really nice run. Um, his overall yards per carry weren't great. It was like 3.9, but I think, just symbolically him being back on the field, him getting that first touchdown really kind of, was one of the highlights of the night, and was one of the guys that I know people wanted to see how he looked. So Ches Malusi would be it for me.
All right, let's look ahead to South Dakota. Similar to Western Michigan, they have a big, experienced quarterback. This South Dakota's quarterback actually more experienced than Hayden Wolf of Western Michigan. A guy, Aiden Bauman, who's had some success. South Dakota has had some success. They're pretty good for an FCS team. I would not at any point. We are not at the point with the Badgers where we could say, well, they'll probably win by several touchdowns and look ahead to Alabama. Hopefully, it's not a trap game or whatever. It's not a trap game because it's a game they could lose. I guess as you look ahead, I'm sure you still imagine the Badgers are by far the better team and should win. Is there anything that gives you pause here? Like what do you think has to be better? Or what do you think has to happen for Wisconsin to assuredly walk away with a win, especially considering they do kind of need that show of force going into Alabama that we are actually a very good football team. How do you look at this matchup?
Yeah, well, I mean, to start off with, when they get to the red zone, you got to have touchdowns instead of field goals.
Mhm.
If last week Wisconsin is more effective in the red zone, then maybe that game is a little more in control early in the third quarter instead of them being behind in the fourth. So, finishing drives is going to be, I think, is going to be key. It's going to be a great test for them. The other thing is, you know, Luke Fickle talked about how South Dakota strategically, maybe he expects them to kind of play them similar to the way Western Michigan's defense did, which is, kind of forcing them to play, make plays underneath and slowly work their way down the field. At some point, does Wisconsin's will to kind of push the ball downfield, you know, supersede, what the defense is giving them? At some point, is Wisconsin going to try to take some deep plays, even though South Dakota is trying to prevent that kind of stuff. So those are two things I'm going to be looking at. Continued progress on the defensive line. Elijah Hills had the one sack last week. And Western Michigan was one of those teams where they really weren't giving Wisconsin a lot of opportunity from a pass rush standpoint. So I'm interested again to see how that unit performs. I mean, I would say those are the kind of the big three: red zone, defensive line, and I said three, and now I'm put myself in trouble because I'm trying to remember the third one. Um, but there were
I could
three
throw
in
out
there. Trust
Sure, I could throw out special teams for you. I mean, they had a rough day against Western Michigan. The fake punt, or I should
me.
say,
Yeah.
the fake field goal that really helped Western. They missed a field goal themselves. They recovered. They recovered the game, play of the game essentially. Austin Brown's recovery on the punt. So got to give them credit for that much. Any personnel changes that you sense, or any position battles that you're really watching? I mean, I don't have one off the top of my head. You did mention the defensive line. I think the concern is still there, but they're thin on bodies. There's just, they have to kind of trudge through with what they have. Anybody else that might get a chance that we didn't see as much against Western Michigan?
Well, it sounds like we're definitely going to see more of a rotation of the defensive linemen. It seemed like last week we only saw four guys, and their hope is to get six guys involved in that rotation, just to keep guys fresh. Maybe this is a game we see a couple of those freshman running backs that have got people so excited. But I think again that's going to be based off of how the game goes. I mean, does Wisconsin get off to a good start, and maybe that creates an opportunity where the coaches feel comfortable putting those younger guys out there. Xavier Lucas, freshman defensive back, had one of the highlight plays of the game, one-handed interception. He's working his way for more playing time. So, he's a guy that, you might see more of on defense. I mean, those are kind of the big ones that kind of come to mind, this week. And I mean, I guess the other thing I would think as far as personnel goes, I guess it'd be interesting to see if, I'm interested to see like these young offensive linemen. Can, Wisconsin get off to the kind of game where they can pull guys, and then we see some of these young offensive linemen get some snaps in the game to see how they look against, competition besides, their teammates. So, those are a handful of things I'm hoping to see.
He is Mark Stewart, Wisconsin Badgers reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Any last thoughts before I let you go?
No, I mean, I think we covered most of it. I mean, like I said, with this being the last game before you face Alabama, you want to build on some success. You don't want to have a threat where you're taking an FCS team into the second half and deep into the third quarter, and there's some question about who's the outcome of the game. That's when you, at that point in the game, if you're a Badger fan, you're hoping, okay, now can I see some of these younger guys, some of these new guys, and get your starters off the field so that they can be in good shape and healthy for next week.
The Wisconsin Badgers taking on South Dakota on Saturday afternoon at Camp Randall Stadium the week before Alabama. Hopefully you get a chance to see it. We will be back to talk more about it next week.